great fun. So it's you know, that's beautiful and that's fun, you know, and then you don't worry so much about the temperature. But like in Greece, you know, 20 degrees. You know, you just.
But you are stationary permanently here,
Yeah, well, I'm now on a permanent contract.
Je zag vandaag al het verschil tussen zo'n vliegtuig wat van de grond vertrekt en dat weer op de grond moet landen.
Sinceramente no es posible hacer mejor que lo que nos hemos presentado. No es posible. Después es la cuestión del precio. Pero nuestro precio no es...
You can't be a candidate.
He looked yesterday's observer position.
Yes.
yeah, in fact, yes.
No.
Yes, it was for Director General, correct one.
No.
So he can't, yeah.
Director General needs to have
Or was it?
no.
And you supported with your means, with the infrastructure.
I do appreciate you.
No, but it's true.
Believe me, this is not that much.
Look, apparently in Denmark they were so enthusiastic, and now for us it's not that easy to have this permit to fly and
But this permits to fly are, you know, this is for a demonstration.
Because the Greeks apparently they
But if that happens, then at least you can start. And I think then it will be kind of snowball effect. Once you will start and others will see, and we can do a bit of feedback from those missions. Then, although I'm not complaining about the interest, I was positively surprised by how many member states came forward to EMSA being interested in.
Cheers.
Oggi la fotosistema è sempre să faci 5 personal. Eu am venit și de la Olimp.
Sì, sai quando è cominciato? Cheers. E quindi vanno a Monterosso anziché a Senigallia. Tutto cominciato? Tutto cominciato con te? No, ma proprio i mandriloni liguri, andiamo là.
Okay. Yeah, that is good. Okay. Yeah, so that we don't duplicate. Okay, good. Ready to go?
And it's rolling.
Okay. European Coast Guard Function Pilot Project has come to an end. We have been collaborating with EMSA, EFCA and Frontex intensively for the 9 months period, and it's clearly shown the added value and need for collaboration also in the future.
Okay. Let's do it another time. But you're gonna pull back a little bit because your hair shine too much.
Ah!
I'm shining. I'm sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, like, yeah. So we don't have the too much the sun. Because you see, you're too tall. So let me redo this. I want this nice logo from EMSA somewhere in the picture, and I have a nice
European Coast Guard Function Pilot Project has been up and running for the 9 months, and now we have a concluding event which clearly has demonstrated the need for collaboration and how it brings added value to the 3 agencies and to the stakeholders.
done.
Okay.
Beautiful. It's rolling.
So I'm very happy to be here in EMSA in Lisbon for celebrating the outcome of the pilot project on the EU Coast Guard undertaking. It has been a good way of improving the cooperation among the 3 agencies in support of the member state authority in charge of Coast Guard and to some extent border control. We have divided the task into 4 areas. The most important for FK, the European Fishery Control Agency has been the delivery of the outline of guidelines for a sectoral qualification framework for Coast Guard. And the second very important task was the cooperation with Frontex and EMSA as well in the framework of sharing capacity. So developing some joint operation with patrol vessel and aircraft in the Mediterranean Sea. The action has been very intensive in 2016 and beginning of 2017, and on the FK perspective, it has been a way of improving our information intelligence and dealing with case of illegal fishing in the Mediterranean Sea.
C'est parfait.
Merci.
Merci monsieur.
De son.
Rolling. On est obligé de reculer un petit peu pour pas avoir trop la lumière. Voilà, c'est parfait. Alors, il faut qu'on vous pose des questions.
Je sais pas, il y a quelqu'un qui pose une question.
Radina?
Could you please give your comments on the outcome of the project, as well as how this project has contributed to enhancing the cooperation between the three agencies in the area of Coast Guard cooperation?
Well, this pilot project gave the possibility to the three agencies, so EMSA, FK and Frontex, to work together and to go very in detail in the operational business. So we were now...
Oui, et je vais vous demander, en plus de ça, excusez-moi de vous mettre dans l'IR, mais là, le soleil est juste vous et j'ai juste le bout de votre nez et votre front qui est éclairé. Là, c'est parfait.
D'accord, d'accord. Well, this pilot project was a very challenging project, but it was extremely successful. It brought together operational people from the three agencies, from EMSA, FK, Frontex. We were able to test, for instance, multi-purpose patrolling activities in the context of Frontex operation, together with a fisheries inspector on board. We were also able to test our ability to report to EMSA cases of pollution at sea. I think this paves the way for a more integrated border management from my perspective, from the perspective of Frontex. But I'm quite sure that from the perspective of the other partners agencies, EMSA and FK, this can pave the way to strengthen maritime surveillance, law enforcement at sea, and this is how we are building gradually an EU Coast Guard.
Perfect.
Parfait.
So we will of course come back on the task 1 and task 2 So concerning the objectives of this task 3, so first of all, we often refer to this idea of developing guidelines, so that was indeed one important element in the context of the pilot project, the development of outline of guidelines. So this is an important that we have to clarify at the very beginning of the project. We have not developed the content of the guideline as such, but we focus more on the structure, the outline of the guidelines, which are to be developed in the context of this guidelines handbook of the Commission. So the idea was first of all to have an agreement on the structure of these future guidelines. Concerning the content or the purpose of this exercise was mainly to provide guidance on this EU agencies cooperation. The idea being to already at this stage try to include information which would be as practical as possible. So we'll come back to that in 2 days after. But the idea was to already include the information concerning contact details, the operational organization in the agencies, and also some elements of best practices, expertise that are already implemented by the three agencies. As I said, the outline of guidelines, this reflection on the content of the future guidelines on the inter-EU agencies cooperation was not the only task that we had to start the reflection. We also had preliminary discussion with colleagues on this idea of having voluntary staff exchange, the idea of exchanging staff between the different agencies, and also on training, more specifically. The idea was to discuss the possibility to have joint training courses between two of the three agencies, so joint training courses, but also trying to determine which training courses would be of relevance for agency staff. So we have, I would say, on the training, we have this reflection, trying to identify these existing courses that would be of mutual interest for the different agency staff, but also trying to have a reflection, already a preliminary reflection, on this idea of organizing joint training courses between our three agencies. So concerning this outline of guidelines, as I said, the pilot project really started at the beginning of 2016. So we had in fact two phases in that project. The first phase, during the first half of 2016, was to carry out a mapping of the existing elements in the three agencies. So first of all, to start with the very beginning, we circulated tables between the three agencies to identify clearly what was the organization in each of the three agencies. The organization, organigram, of course, but the elements concerning the functioning of each agency and to identify who does what in each organizational unit, which means to each unit level. So this was done for the three agencies, and this is an element which has been annexed to the draft outline that we have developed. So very practical information, contact details, names, and area of responsibility in each organization. So it was one first mapping exercise that was carried out. The second one was easier because we already, as was previously mentioned, we already had certain areas for cooperation between the three agencies. So here, the idea was to identify the different existing SLAs, so the three existing SLAs that we have between the three agencies. We'll come back on that also. And finally, so third phase of this mapping exercise, trying to list all available Coast Guard related handbooks and guidelines which are already implemented by the different agencies. Implemented, it means still under development or already published for all kind of users or for only specific end users. So that was the first part of the exercise, this mapping, where we're collecting information from the other agencies. So concerning the development phase, here, as I said, moving from the mapping to the development, based on the materials that we have collected, we have started, as from summer 2016, we have started really the development of the guidelines as such. So the first phase of this development was from our side to select experts on this. It's true that not all agencies had the expertise on this specific question. So from our side, from FK side, we published in July 2016 a call for expression of interest to have already this kind of Coast Guard experts that could work for this specific project. So this was published in July 2016. From EMSA and Frontex side here, the idea was to designate their own internal expert or for Frontex to use an external expert, taking into already existing list of experts which will be used in Frontex. So first phase, I would say, selection of these experts, internal or external. Then we, as from September, October, initiated the drafting phase. So we had already identified in the activity fiche agreed by the contact group decided to have development workshops. So we had a first development workshop in October last year here in ENSA with the colleagues from ENSA, where we already had a discussion on the scope, on the objective of this outline. We had the second development workshop, so here it was in November 2016, again here in ENSA, with all the experts designated by the agencies, training now at this stage to go a bit more into the drafting phase of the project. So to summarize, at the end of 2016, after these two development workshops, we managed to have a first draft. So this first draft was already inserted in the interim report of the pilot project, because that was the first draft version where we already had an agreement on the, I would say, high-level structure of the outline. And then, beginning of 2017, we initiated really the phase where we would finalize the drafting of the outline, where we had this development workshop in Stockholm, in the Swedish Coast Guard headquarters, in March 2017, where I can say we finalized the exercise of the drafting. So I would say, to summarize the process, we have this constant exchange between the experts in charge of drafting and the agencies in charge of reviewing the draft developed by the experts. So I would say that at this stage we are today, beginning of June, so we have now circulated, agreed and finalized the outline. So now it will be integrated in the final report concerning the project, in particular task 3 under the pilot project. Here you have in this slide a description of the high-level structure of the guidelines. So here we didn't go into details concerning the structure, so you only have the main titles of the outline. But the idea was to already identify in the introduction, to specify the subject, the scope, and to provide certain definitions for the drafting of the outline, and also to refer to the cooperation framework. We have mentioned earlier this morning the ongoing discussion on the tripartite working arrangement. So as part of the introduction, the further discussion that we would have between the three agencies, the framework of this agreement are already included in that introduction. So subject, scope, definition, cooperation framework. We also identify the legal references which are relevant for this outline of guidelines, so mainly the 3 founding regulations of the agencies. Third part concerning the areas and modalities for cooperation. Here, the idea, the objective was to build on the existing areas for cooperation between the 3 agencies, and building on these areas, trying to formalize a bit the modalities for that existing cooperation, and already consider possible areas for further cooperation in the future. So this, we have identified these 4 areas for cooperation. So without entering into details, these 4 areas were identified during the kickoff meeting that we had here in ENSA in April 2016. So we identified these 4 areas of cooperation, and then we elaborated on this basis, trying to identify the different ways to formalize more that cooperation. So operational cooperation, training cooperation, situational awareness, and research and development were the 4 areas where we managed to identify the different activities of the agencies. Concerning the annexes, which are at this stage an important part of the work which has been done, we have included in the annexes, in fact, the result of the mapping that we carried out in 2016. So here you will find again what I mentioned previously, so the list of existing SLAs. So the 3 SLAs, the first one between 2015 between FK and ENSA for Marser. The second one concerning FK and Frontex for the provision of service in the framework of Eurosur. The third one concerning ENSA and Frontex, again, this SLA being agreed for giving support to Frontex activities for the implementation of Eurosur. So The three SLAs are mentioned there. The list of existing guidelines and books are also already listed in the annex to the outline of guidelines. So it has been, as I said previously, a lot of work for colleagues to identify this different existing material. So concerning EMSA in particular, you have identified more than 100 existing guidelines, technical handbooks, so a lot of material which is already collected. Concerning Frontex, there were 13 already existing guidelines and books. And finally, for FK, it was 6 of this kind of guidelines and book, mainly referring to the one we have under our core curriculum for training. So a lot of material which has been collected and already identified, listed in this annex. These different material were identified as already being published for some of them, and for some other documents, guidelines or handbooks which were under development in certain agencies. And finally, the two last annexes, the one concerning the identified areas for cooperation with Common, this is a result of the kickoff meeting that we had here in April 2016 in Lisbon. And finally, the table concerning the different elements of organization in the three agencies with the contact details and all these elements that I previously mentioned. So, concerning specifically training, as I said, we had this specific discussion trying to identify the areas for cooperation in the area of the topic of training. First phase was to map our existing training courses. So in most of the agencies, we have a catalog of trainings, or we have, particularly for context, this is called portfolio of training course. So we have different types of documents which summarize the offer of training which are in place in the agencies. So first step was to already map these existing training courses in the three agencies. Then, based on this first mapping, we had a discussion trying to identify the needs for a possible joint multi-operational course in the future. So that was an element of the discussion that we had, and which is reflected in the outline of guidelines. And finally, we had this discussion concerning the feasibility, added value. So here again, the objective was not to identify all of our courses and to say that all of them were relevant for our staff. We had this exercise of identification, selection, where we agreed that there would be an interest for our staff to participate to training organized by another agency. So this idea of selecting existing courses, so possible inter-agency mutual attendance to training, that was the first idea. Also a reflection on this organization of joint courses by different agencies. So that was the main point which were discussed there, which, as I said, are reflected in the annex to the outline of guidelines that we developed. So to be very concrete here, we have for the three agencies the list of training courses which were identified as being of mutual interest. So you can see here that it's already a limited number of courses, but it's quite significant. I would say so. Not all agencies have an interest for the courses by another, but some of them have already identified a course of specific interest. So you can see here that basically the common elements that we identified in the three agencies are courses related to port state control, so from a maritime safety perspective, but also from a fish control inspection perspective. So port state control, maritime surveillance, and also the thematic concerning risk management, risk analysis. That was also an area which was considered of interest. So I will not go further into that list, but the idea was already to have this selection exercise, I will show you a bit later in which way we manage to implement or to, in concrete terms, this interest. So what I can illustrate from the FK side, we have concerning this catalog, our training catalog, we have already identified in this catalog specifically the courses which are of interest for.
From our side? Maybe Pascal?
Yeah, I would say it's not for, I just want it would be more for the Commission because of the new provision common to the agency. We understood that the Commission now should provide the answers for what are the ideas or the framework prevailing to this possible continuation of the project.
Thank you, Pascal. Any other comments, questions? If not, then thank you very much, Alexandra. We go on. Our next topic will be the last.
Executive directors of three agencies and colleagues. Honourable guests, it's my pleasure to be here representing Task 4. Despite of the fact being the last on the list, but not least important one, I will try to underline most important elements from this Task 4 cooperation we have this partnership of EFCA, and I will try to start with a quote of Henry Ford, which is probably fitting to this event. Coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. I hope with this pilot project we succeeded to work together, all three agencies, giving a really clear message to member states and users, and providing a really good platform for them to get European Coast Guard services fitting to their needs. To put our Task 4 multi-purpose operations in a nutshell, also I would like to thank policymakers which really pushed forward agencies towards the direction of Coast Guard functions. And as you can see already from September 2015, DGs started to speak together, 3 DGs actually came together, where they provided non-paper during European Coast Guard's function forum, which was distributed, providing idea on streamlining cooperation on Coast Guard functions. And afterwards there was pilot project adopted in December, and practical implementation started from January, when we had operations concept development together among agencies. At the same time, once again, I have to refer to excellent cooperation with end users, and especially end users from both communities. And at the end of the day, we had to negotiate with member states. And from January, immediately we had possibility, thanks to the Italian Coast Guard, to deploy OPV with fisheries control mission within Frontex Joint Coordinated Operation Triton. So this was very quickly arranged and in very professional way. So once again, thank you for your open-mindedness, that sometimes agencies are coming with new ideas and it's not easy to implement on a national level, which we have to respect procedures, etc., to overcome other shortcomings. So this was really well done. Another important moment I would like to refer was March, when we had EFCA and Frontex stakeholder meeting, when we bring together practitioners who are working on the field from different communities, starting to speak together to understand the problems as Frontex Border Guard community, Coast Guard community has different type of issues. That's why it's very good to build trust. And all about was to build trust during these meetings and convince that Frontex is not now going to take over fisheries control or safety control or other tasks. So we still keep with our main mandates of the agencies. What we do, we foster cooperation. We try to make cost-effective action altogether that member states could benefit. And at the same time, we don't waste resources. So it was good to realize and member states to meet, to speak together and to establish this cooperation on agency level. And other events are related to interim report, which we produced in December, provided to Commission, to DGs, and as well we continued testing in 2017, and by today we closed pilot project. We believe that we have sufficient ground and basis to continue this interagency cooperation, integrating all tasks together in efficient action. So, continuing with my presentation, how it started, just to put in the brief points, we had to sit together, all agencies, and to identify our priorities. As you understand, each agency, as we spoke today, has different plans, different activities already settled, and plans for annual planning. That's why we had to prioritize areas, and Central Mediterranean was a commonly area identified by agencies as most of interest. However, during implementation, we got excited and we said, okay, maybe we can do a bit more and to go to other areas to explore other possibilities. That's why also Eastern Mediterranean was involved with joint operation Poseidon, and as well we expanded trials in Western Mediterranean with Operation Indolo, hosted by Spain. And to add to this, recently we had also possibility to have excellent cooperation hosted by Romanian authorities in the Black Sea. We are open also to other sea basins, as we said several meetings, if member states are seeing any interest. So we would be glad as agencies to come and to provide services, which you heard also today from previous speakers. Also, I would like to confirm once again a statement which was done also by executive directors several times, that we are not inventing the wheel. We are, as agencies, cooperating since almost establishment with each other, and we try to use what already exists. So basically, Frontex has offered operational platforms which are ready for different actions, multi-purpose actions. At the same time, agencies, other agencies provided also their services to be integrated. So it was a good opportunity to use and merge all the agencies' capabilities to the support of member states. As well, we try to exceed cooperation in the way that we test our limits, to which extent we can manage. I think it shows that agencies, they have really robust platforms and backbones. They're able to handle really heavy activities. I can really refer us to Frontex. We are maritime domain, quite having substantial presence. Since 2006, we are running joint maritime operations with annual presence in Central Mediterranean with Triton operation, as well as Eastern Mediterranean with Poseidon operation, and also some tailored operations in peak periods by deploying of dozens of assets and several hundreds of experts at the once. So this is really good value for other agencies as well as stakeholders to use this capabilities and to explore for other tasks. At the same time, like you heard today, we integrated services from other tasks, from task 1 and task 2. During the operational scenario, which was real, was not fake once again, everything was tested in the real case scenarios during joint maritime operations, and from this we could learn the best lessons. How we organized all of this? Once again, we've been basing our cooperation on the settings of the agencies. For Frontex side, we had joint maritime operations platforms, and from EFCA side, we have joint deployment platforms which were used, or frameworks. And for coordination purposes, definitely we had to be in contact with member states, as they are our end users and main partners, and therefore we had periodic involvement of member states in this implementation group. And additionally to that, each agency defined the contact point, and so now I can call at any time to colleagues from EFCA and EMSA and discuss on any operational topic, because we got used to this cooperation, and it really works excellent. I can convince you there is now any issue to get any information. At the same time, we try to speak with one voice with member states, that on operational aspects there is common position established, and to provide to member states additional benefits, but not to make burden, if I would put in this way. When it comes to legal parts, for Frontex joint operations, we have operational plans, which are binding documents signed by executive director and host member state. And this operational plan was having also references to interagency cooperation. And at the same time, from EFCA's side, we had joint deployment plans also incorporating interagency agreements. Going to more details, definitely when you operate on technical level, you need some procedures. For that purpose, we had standard operating procedures developed per each area, central, eastern, and western. Basically to know how to exchange information, in which format to report, what to report. As you can imagine, if airplane or patrolling vessel is coming from the Baltic Sea, has a different approach than to the issues which vessel or airplane is going to face in central Mediterranean. So we had to adjust also this part. On the other hand, we had to provide also briefings to all those involved in activities, multi-purpose activities, before deployment started. And it took some time to explain to member states why we need this cooperation, because I am coming here to fly for border control. Why you need me also to report on possible illegal fishery or pollution cases? But afterwards, when you explain to colleagues, it seems very, very easy to understand that we have to use benefit of service, surveillance service. It's really luxurious to have airplane airborne, which we pay starting from 6,000 euros per flying hour. So it's very good opportunity to everybody to utilize this flying hour for different purposes. Because at the sea, when you overfly, you can meet different types of infringements. And just as reference, last year only, during Frontex joint coordinated operations, 96 tons of drugs were detected and arrested by national authorities thanks to Frontex support. So it's once again showing added value of European approach at maritime domain, an integrated approach or Coast Guard functions approach, that we don't lose any important information. And for this reason, also I would like to underline the importance of cooperation with other agencies, which could be expanded. Today we have European Defence Agency, who joins the family. Also, I could refer to Europol, which is a natural Frontex partner, dealing at maritime domain related to intelligence and countering smuggling and trafficking with different projects like Jotmare and Pedro initiatives together in Italy, Greece, as well as MAO. I think it's relevant, and both agencies are present here. So I think we can really build on current cooperation and involve all actors at maritime domain, which is also in line with European maritime security strategy. Once again, organization and responsibilities were done in the way that at the same time, besides the fact that we had interagency cooperation and dedicated tailored meetings, we still kept our own meetings related to border control, for example, perspective. So we didn't ignore our main field, and at the same time continued with their stakeholders' activities. And this is just illustration of operational areas. When we had also to sit together with the agencies, when I mentioned before, to make priorities, what we do and where we do. And at the end of the day, especially with EFCA, we identified that Central Mediterranean was a very priority area. And as you can see on the map, for Frontex it's also, and as you can hear today, Central Med is also increasingly active, having over 60,000 of migrants and other types of crimes in this area. So this was really good to put these maps together and overlay and to see which really hotspots we have. And as you saw from previous presentations, basically Central Med was really giving a lot of results. And for the results, my colleague from EFCA will explain to you. What else we done from practical point of view? We have to understand who is operating where. Because at the end of the day, we realize that we have sometimes similar partners, authorities, being present at sea, more or less at the same period, operating quite in vicinity. So it was beneficial to exchange deployment plans in advance, monthly basis, when we had listed assets which are present in Italy, which are assets present in Greece, and more specifically which hours they are patrolling in which areas, so that in case EFCA colleagues would like to have some common mission, they could also fit to certain schedule. So this was really beneficial to have this type of information exchange among agencies. What more? We had also, as I mentioned at the beginning, starting from Italian Coast Guard, deployment of EFCA officials on Frontex co-financed assets, seaborne and airborne as well, several missions. As well, once again, thank you for member state flexibility to accept this liaison officer on board, because each time we had to negotiate, because it's additional person on board, so it has to be in advance arranged space, because you immediately get reduced endurance when you put additional person. But in most cases, we had no problem to negotiate with member states of having this additional asset expert embedded to Frontex flying or sailing means. As well, we had opportunity to strengthen exchange of data. And I believe my colleague will confirm that we completely overloaded FK servers. We have to increase their capacity. Dozens of sightings were sent, over 1,000, with high resolution photos, and we received very positive feedback from the colleagues. And information was really provided close to real time. As well, we sent one operational colleague to FK Center, to Vigo, during Bluefin Tuna campaign, which was a link between operations and facilitated the chain of command and as well of communications. This was very, very beneficial. As well, also FCAS inspector was received on international coordination centers. So this showed very flexibility from both sides. So once again, the information was followed in agreed procedures by both agencies and respecting at the same time the mandates of the agencies. Each agency had to deal with information provided, so if FK was receiving context was
who will continue the presentation from FK. Neil, floor is yours.
Thank you, good afternoon, executive directors, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the opportunity to speak. And of course, thank you to the doubters. Here, I think I want to go a little bit deeper, and we've discussed a lot today about some of the, clearly, the very extremely positive cooperation we have, the exchange of information, the systems, the sightings, and I wanted to, within my presentation, go a little bit deeper to some of the success stories, some of the examples, some of the results that we actually have achieved, and I can show you very clearly how we are actually getting very solid cases that are actually coming from the pilot project. So firstly, I'll go to the sighting. This is something that Alfred was speaking about. We heard already also from our colleagues in Frontex when we spoke of sightings coming from the mass operation. For the purposes of the task 4 then, we developed a sighting form that was within the standard operating procedures, covering Frontex and FK stakeholders, but also in collaboration, of course, with EMSA. This allowed us to tailor the information that we would be receiving from the sighting that would be more interesting and essentially useful from a fisheries perspective. And this is very useful. For example, the photos, the type of markings that we would be most interested in. Because obviously the interest to have this information is increased if we're actually able to use it and follow it up very quickly. The longer there's any delay, obviously the utility of that information would decrease significantly. So the sighting form was an extremely useful way to have the sightings reported to us in almost real time. And as I said, the photos even more so when they're very high resolution, they're able to give us, for example, the markings or discernible features of the vessel which we could follow up with to conclude at the end of the day whether the target was legitimate, whether it was actually fishing, it should be there, or was not actually engaged in anything that it should not be doing. So firstly, just to give you a little bit of an example of why we had common interests, why we had common areas, and where we had operational examples where we had common interests, common planning, common risk assessment, and common results. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Within the Mediterranean, to give you one example of a fishery, we have, it's quite an iconic species, the bluefin tuna. It's fished in the Mediterranean, mostly now for farming purposes. It's very high value. There's a lot of vessels fishing. It's highly regulated, extremely highly regulated, and it's been subject to a recovery plan by the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas Convention, 54 countries, that govern it. It's been under a recovery plan for about 10 years. And I think it's got probably one of the most regulated fisheries, one of the most regulated species. And for a period of 1 month in the middle of the summer, from the end of May, it's currently now, until the end of June, purseaners that can catch the fish for farming are fishing in the central Mediterranean. And here you can see, based on VMS, the foreign fleet, the non-EU fleet, just to give you an example, Albanian, Nigerian, Egyptian, Libyan, Tunisian, and Turkish, the Turkish, albeit being in the east. Fishing very much in the Straits of Sicily, very much in a condensed area. They have been fishing historically in this area for some years. But if then you overlay the sightings information, the positions of the sightings that we're getting within Joint Operation Triton, you can very instantly see the common areas that we have. And so when we're receiving sightings from other vessels or potential fishing vessels in exactly the same area, it's obviously a huge benefit for us and the member states when following up their obligations with regard to the controlling of the vessels. And during this very short period for fishing operations. So I think this very much clearly demonstrates the common areas we have. It wasn't just in the Mediterranean, but I think you can clearly identify here that although this is indeed an area very important for fisheries, it's also very much falls into the migration highway, if I can use that expression as well. Just a little bit more detail then on the flags of the vessels, the fishing vessels that have been sighted and forwarded to us and exchanged between the stakeholders and member states. Mostly it's Italian, by definition, but there was some Maltese and other EU flags. But from the non-EU flags, we have Tunisian, some Egyptian, some Algerian, and a few other third country vessels as well. I'd like to kind of stress also to the column on the far right, more than almost 200 vessels they weren't able to identify through either absence of markings or it wasn't able to detect the flag clearly. And I think this is very important to know because this is one of the value of the sighting. It's only useful if you're able to follow up on the information. So quite a lot of flags involved, and certainly our interest in some parts of the season with the third countries, given that there may be and have been and continue to be possibly involved in other activities such as illegal smuggling of migrants and so on. As far as the progression of the sightings throughout the period of the pilot project, I think you cannot see too well, but the first peak represents the last summer, when, as I mentioned, we had the peak of the bluefin tuna fishing operations. There was a gentle and continued supply of sightings exchanged between us until the end of the year. That peak represents certainly in part the multi-purpose aerial surveillance, the mass operations that was presented earlier by colleagues from Frontex. But I think in general, I'd just like to say that in general, the quality of the sightings is extremely useful to be followed up on. And I think that was also stressed by the Powers that it's only useful to have this information if it's directly reported in real time and with as much information such as high quality photos as possible. Just to give you a little bit more of a solid example, as I mentioned, the fishery, and using the case study again of bluefin tuna because it's quite a good one, the fishery, the authorised fishing period for the bluefin tuna finishes on the 24th of June. So here we had a case study after that period when fishing operations were not authorised. These sightings were forwarded to us from a Latvian helicopter aircrew operating on the Joint Operation Triton based in Lampedusa. We had already involved and had briefings that the Powers also mentioned with them. They were able then to deliver some sightings to us. And the crew were able to identify vessels, targets that were consistent potentially with fishing operations. Here, they are able to identify smaller vessels that are associated with purse seine operations. They were then able to follow up because they knew that to be more useful, we would need markings, and also we would need potentially more detail if they were actually engaged in fishing operations and not just perhaps either fishing for another species or just navigating. And as they went on, they were able to then get that type of useful images that we would need, such as the net being hauled out of the water, which seemed obvious, but it's actually vital to have this level of detail. And just to be sure that they were not fishing perhaps sardines or something else, they were able to then go into a lot more detail and take images that prove that they were not indeed sardines bluefin tuna. So clearly a very interesting case study for us, clearly demonstrating that the sightings are extremely useful, and the most important thing that when put together with training, when briefing, when having this additional capacity as a crew that know what they're looking for is extremely useful for us. I mean, bluefin tuna is an example, but now more recently we have Mediterranean swordfish, we have other perhaps deep water shrimp and hake in the Straits of Sicily as well. All these species are likely to be under recovery plan, the stocks are in trouble. Therefore, they are becoming priorities for the member states, they are becoming priorities for us, and they will be very much, if not already, encapsulated within our joint development plans. So although we have good solid examples of bluefin tuna, we are likely to be expanding the targets of interest for us, and that underlines the importance of briefings for the air crew in the international coordination centre with the operators that are actually in the field, because without this level of detail, the value is diminished. Other objects of interest, other case studies, we had an Egyptian fishing vessel, all in two in Triton and Indolo that I think were quite good examples. An Egyptian fishing vessel that was used for migrant smuggling, that was photographed, and as you can see here, with migrants on board, also a Tunisian vessel, and also a Spanish fishing vessel which was involved in Indolo with a drug seizure on board. I think also to mention what I was saying about the Tunisian Egyptian, the fishing fleets are quite large, and as I mentioned, they're in some respects quite unquantified. There's a large wooden fleet, there's a lot of artisanal fisheries, there's artisanal fisheries mixed with industrial fisheries. There is two management organisations primarily that are responsible for fisheries in general within the high seas in the Mediterranean, ICAT, which I mentioned already, and the GFCM, an FAO body. The fleet sizes that are already authorized with these organizations are already very large. To give you some examples, the authorized Egyptian fleet above 15 meters is about 2,000, and these are the vessels which have been legitimately authorized. So just there's a lot of fishing vessels operating, some legitimately, some perhaps not, in areas where we all have a common interest. So just to give some example there of the scope of the fishing activities, certainly from our side in these areas. So to summarize then, from the sighting point of view, almost 90% included photos attached to the report that was extremely useful, because even when we don't have a very clear name, we're able to follow up with other information. There was a small number in the night, albeit useful nonetheless, but it's obviously going to be more difficult for the operator to have any discernible markings from the targets. 165 were finally classified as unknown. But in general, it's still early. Risk assessment, planning, strategic, using the limited resources that are available at sea. It goes without saying that the benefits within the fisheries control perspective, our point of view is very much self-evident. Moving on, from the mission deployment, as Vitalka said, we also deployed our experts on the vessels on both the sea and in the air, 5 sea missions, 8 air missions, and also, as was already presented, for the MAS as well within those flights, 29 flights. Obviously, when we are deploying our experts on Frontex coordinated assets in the joint operations, the other tasks and responsibilities, such as SAR by the ICC, or certainly SAR, MRCC, would obviously take precedence, but nonetheless, I think it's important to note that we're able and have proved to successfully deploy from our side our resources, our experts in the areas, in the scene of action, if you like. Briefings, I tried to underline the importance of the briefings already. The fisheries, the situations change, the situations with the migrants change, and I think it's always, and we will continue to engage both the coordination centres and the member state crew that are performing the joint operational activities and deployments. We've done up to now 7 briefings in Triton, 3 in Indolo and 5 in Australia. As my colleagues mentioned, and as the executive directors also mentioned in their opening speeches, we've done the best we can with the resources we have. I mean, these are the numbers we should commend ourselves, because it was not easy to be everywhere at the same time. But we tried, with the excellent cooperation we had with Frontex, to try and prioritise the work as much as we could in the briefings, to increase the technical capability of the crew as much as we can with the resources that we have. The briefings that we did obviously were as much fisheries focused as possible. The specific time of the year, the joint deployment plan activities that we have, and how to compile the information, and how to take the information and report it to us in the most useful and expeditious way. As the others mentioned, it was reciprocal. We had Frontex experts come into our operations room in the peak of the Bluefin Tuna campaign last year. We're also engaging with them now. The campaign is also on. We don't have an expert at the moment, but we're also having regular discussions and operational planning communications with them, as Albus mentioned, such as the SIPRA, the planning of means, and the fixing of priorities, common priorities. And also, which was, again, I won't go into detail, with the mass operation for experts deployed in March and April of this year. As Albus again mentioned, we didn't only stay in the Mediterranean. We're exploring this type of cooperation in the Black Sea. We organised very recently an implementation group where we bring the different communities together. In the case of the Black Sea, there was 4 different agencies: the Bulgarian Border Police, and then the agency responsible for fisheries, and likewise for Romania. And the first day was really exploring initially where we could do common activities, where we shared mutual interest, where there could be this type of promotion of synergies for the future. And then on the second 2 days, then we put this into practice, do some initial trips at sea. There was an initial mission at sea, where there was a real fisheries control voyage with border surveillance capability in parallel. Yes, it is. Finally, as we also mentioned, we've also, within the period of the pilot project, always wanted to try and exchange common practices, promote the synergies as much as possible, including with the excellent work that's already been done up to now by the Functions Forum. In this regard, we tried to promote, certainly, with as it was the priority of the day, to have the inter-agency, intra-agency as well, cooperation within the various stakeholders. And this was, we were present for the drill implemented recently in Troia in Portugal.
This can also bring added value to the core business of Frontex, to the core business of border guards. And this is especially the case if we bear in mind that Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, has now an extended mandate in the field of security, fight against crime, organized crime at the external borders, prevention of terrorism at the external borders, which brings us to a closer cooperation with Europol, between Frontex and Europol on the one side, with Frontex and now Eurojust. So we are developing cooperation, let's say, in the core business of security, law enforcement, fight against crime, terrorism, all these topics which are on the top of the agenda, unfortunately, in the European Union. On the other hand, this cooperation with other agencies in the maritime domain can probably bring more business to you, because maybe we can also bring new cases which are relevant for EMSA, cases which are relevant for EFCA. And we were discussing during this presentation, and we had also opportunities with other directors, with Pascal and Marco, Now a question maybe for member states. We are able to provide kind of evidences of infringements, breach of law, criminal activities or whatever. Can national courts use this? Can national law enforcement, national investigating services use this as an evidence which is valid in the court to convict the criminals or the people or the companies who infringe the law? So maybe this could be one ambition going further, but of course the three agencies, we can only support the member states, we can only support the EU policy makers. Maybe in the course of the next month we will, in the context of our trilateral steering group, when we are going to agree on strategic actions, we will see how we can go further based on this operational experience, based on what we have already tested in the field of capacity, in the field of development of common or shared information. But maybe one step further, maybe one day we will come together back to you, member states and Commission and EU policy makers, and maybe one day we would say, well, we have identified this and this and this. We are ready, we can work together, we are interoperable in operational sense, but now, what about real use of this for a proper law enforcement? So this would be maybe one question we'd like to suggest.
Thank you. I share a lot of this ideas, I would say. I think that first of all, an agency is not a polity. The responsibility of implementing the European policy are the member states. So we cannot do much without you. We can support you, we can coordinate, we can assist, but I would say the driving force in our legal arrangement is falling under the responsibility of the member state. So the question today is, as I tried to convey it during my little speech of this morning, is what can we do more altogether? How can we move from me to us, doing something altogether? And I think I see a few areas where we could work, of course, with the support and the agreement of the Commission toward maybe a more impact or result-oriented approach. We are all accountable here. We have money from the member state, from our citizens, which are paying taxes, and we have to do the best we can. And my feeling is that we need to be more, I would say, result-driven. First of all, we need a strategy. We have tested the concept. We know that we can work together efficiently, and I think the member states were part of this pilot project, and I think we can do better altogether. So the strategy is having, first of all, a clear delimitation of what we could do altogether within the remit of the Coast Guard approach. What are the objectives? How we measure this objective? How we develop a risk management strategy which should, I would say, encompass maybe different aspects of the risk. But I think we need to develop a vision, and that can be done in the present arrangement of between us and maybe suggesting, proposing to the board, or can be done in a different, I would say, governance model with a sort of regional steering group made by the board member of the areas and conveying these ideas, strategies, risk analysis to the board of different agencies to approve or not approve. The second aspect, and I would like to echo what has been said by my two predecessors, there are a few gaps or limbos in the legal arrangements. We have an interesting capacity with the so-called union inspector in the framework of the common fishery policy, but this doesn't exist everywhere. You can have, for example, one member state inspector of one policy aboard a patrol vessel of another member state. Depending on the national organization of the legal system, the inspector of the with a different flags of patrol vessel on which he or she is might not be able to provide or be recognized as a valid testimony of the infringement. Is that question the capacity and our capacity of to be responsive and to be agile in a multi-purpose operation. We also know that we have a huge concern with, I would say, the limits of the water limits in the Med, for example. We have some grey areas. We have some unilateral declaration of areas, and that also concern our capacity of deployment and what we can do legally and without breaching any even national legislation. And, moving now to the third dimension, to the air, we also know the complexity and for the time being, the difficulty to fly non-manned aerial system, and that is also a real concern for the future. We see the capacities which are very promising, but at the same time we have a real concern. So I would say there are some things that we can do, I would say, easily. We can work on the strategy, we can work on risk management strategy, we can work on KPIs, we can measure the efficiency, we can make a joint implementation of some policies. But on the other hand, the member states are also to agree on these ideas and to support this proposal and to be actor and promoter on these ideas. So sorry to be so long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm looking at the time now, and I would propose that we go for a coffee and we come back 4 o'clock, and then we can continue this part of the agenda, questions and discussion. This was a bit feed water for the discussion and a certain kind of wrap up from the.
So what's the division at home? Normally it's women that are talking.
Yeah, but I mean, in politics there's enough women too. So I think we are becoming feminine in politics. So should I start to talk? Where should I look?
You can. Me.
Yeah.
At you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Observing this workshop, I'm happy to say that I will bring back a very, very positive message to European Parliament, that all three agencies are working very well together. There's good progress of cooperation, and there is no fear that somebody is intruding in each other's affairs. The outcome of this meeting is definitely a more safe European borders and more. Okay.
Sorry. Sorry.
Just silent.
Okay, let's try once more. From the beginning, okay?
Yes.
I'm happy to bring back a message to European Parliament that all agencies are working very well here.
Sorry. Apologies.
Okay, maybe you close the door, shoot them.
Yeah.
That's it.
Ladies.
Otherwise I will really talk long.
All those women.
Okay, can I start? No, let's try.
Yeah.
I'm happy to bring back a message to European Parliament from this workshop that all three agencies are cooperating very well. The level of cooperation is deep. There is much more practical issues discussed, and it definitely will increase the security of our outside borders and cooperation between agencies and member states, including many matters. I think this is one of the examples where we can show that European Union works in practice.
Done. You're free. You've done this before,
before
obviously.
somebody's shooting something else.
That's
Okay.
good. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
We are at the moment, and really we are not doing this exercise for ourselves, but it's for the member states. So I would like to see some hands up to comment and put questions about the topics we have discussed today. Who will be brave to start? Our Swedish colleagues, please.
Thank you, and thank you very much for very good presentations and for good work so far. I have some questions, some comments, and then I also heard a question from the plenary. So I start with the question that was raised from the Executive Director of Frontex, I think. Is this what we have presented good enough to bring evidence to court? Good question. And the answer, I would say, could differ quite a lot who country you ask, because the national jurisdiction will set the frames of that. And the reason for that is that there are quite many different types of coast guarding. We talk about organizations as coast guards, I'm representing. They are independent organizations, as the Swedish Coast Guard, coordinating all the civil requirements for maritime surveillance and information. But we are not a part of the family that you three executive directors represents, and that is a challenge as it is. In other countries, such as Finland, we have an integrated coast guard in the border guard, and some other countries have a coordinating body, so to say. So it's quite a challenge to meet the member states and to have the dialogue with the member states. But what I think it's important to say is the national jurisdiction that gives the authority for the Coast Guard organizations, whatever they are called, to act. Could be a possibility to carry out inspections, and that is. You write a report, send it in to the competent authority. Or it could be a law enforcement agency, as the Coast Guard, for example, or the Border Guard in Finland, that can actually also start an investigation, bring evidence to court, carry out arrests, and so on. And that is, according to a question, the last part is not possible if you don't have the authority to carry out an investigation or to make an arrest. And you can take an oil spill, for example. Every authority in the world are obliged, more or less, by the Marpol Convention to send a flag state report on what they had seen. In Sweden, we claim that you can also arrest the vessel, bring it to the harbour, and carry out an investigation, bring evidence to court. But you can also decide upon what you call an oil pollution fee, which is not a fine, it's a fee, an administrative fee, as you can also in some cases according to fishery investigations. So it's not an easy question to answer, I would say. What could be done is, according to the different types of crimes, you can have joint investigation teams between different authorities, between different countries. And that is used from case to case by law enforcement authorities. That's from the Swedish perspective. Could be different from other countries, maybe. I have some reflections also, and maybe also a question. Listening to your presentations and taking also, in some cases, part in the developments that you have worked with, I can't help having the reflection that you are very much talking about the operational focus according to operations. GDPs, joint operations and so on, according to Frontex. but the daily work is more than operations focused on special issues. And from that perspective, I also hear that you talk very much about your internal cooperation, more actually than cooperation with member states. I'm looking very much forward to cooperation with member states, and if I should express a question, it will be, how will you go further? We haven't heard much about your agreement between your three executive directors. I know there is one, and that includes also an organization, I think, on how to go further. And my question will be, what do you expect for the member states? Do you expect us to in some way implement this new EU regulation in national legislation? Is there any, do you have any reflections on that? According to Swedish situation, I would say that there are no initiatives taken at the moment to implement what you are working with international legislation. We have a system with the National Advisory Board on Maritime Surveillance, which I'm the chairman of at the moment, for a couple of weeks more. But what do you expect from the nations, from the member states, according to implementing this in national legislation? Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. Then we had, on the other hand, we will respond to these questions. We collect the questions and then we respond. There was somebody else also on the same corner.
Thank you very much. Ben Nichols from Europol, job market, I'm not a member state, another agency. I'd like to congratulate all the players today on the enormous progress that's been made in really quite a short time, and especially I'd like to extend some thanks to Frontex and the FSC, with whom we cooperate almost on a daily basis, and that's extremely fruitful. I'm pleased that Ms. Legeri touched on the question of organised crime. It's really important to complete the full situational picture, and that is the identification and disruption of organised crime groups. Europol is not in the business of tracking vessels, that's not what we do. But we're very much involved in identifying and analysing criminality involved in the maritime domain and supporting member states in their investigations. I have to say this is a truly horizontal issue that cuts across all forms of criminality, not just migrant smuggling, but weapons, cigarette smuggling, drugs, etc., etc. It's about the people concerned and the interconnected companies, the crew, behind each boat, whether it's large or it's a small boat. We, Europol, that is, has currently identified over 800 vessels of interest, and that information comes from multiple sources. And we've concentrated also on disrupting crime group business models, supply lines, and financial flows. Of course, Europol has challenges, particularly on data protection and exchange, overclassification of information, and sometimes there is a reluctance by member states to share information. But now, of course, we've got a revised Europol regulation which should facilitate the sharing of information with a much wider range of stakeholders. And it's perhaps a good moment to ensure that all this excellent progress is fully deconflicted and integrated and taking into account all facets of law enforcement activity. It's not really a question, but I think it's a question of how do we achieve that. Thank you.
Not only describing, but also focusing on concrete projects which are testing the possibilities on the way ahead. So we should congratulate you for the successful outcome. And I should add, in a very, very demanding timelines, we should highlight this. And we know as European citizens how important is this step. So congratulations to you and also to the three DGs we should identify that. In the morning, the European Test Agency was mentioned a couple of times. We should thank those that they made reference, and also we saw it also in the slides. But not only the European Defence Agency, other agencies like SATSEN, and I took the microphone from Europol. I should welcome this approach, which goes broader than the three agencies, because this project indeed has synergies and relevance to other activities and to other sectors. In the past, of course, Sid Mill
and also some advertising benefiting from the fact that the European Coast Guard Functions Forum was mentioned. But first of all, I would like also to echo the congratulations for the three agencies and for the long walk that already was, the long way that already was walked since October. Basically what the COSTEX was mentioned here, and mentioned related with multifunction, multi-agency operations concept. In fact, COSTEX was not an exercise, a traditional exercise, to assess the performance of the actors, of the teams of the crews. COSTEX was an experiment to test and validate the assumptions of a concept. And this concept is the multifunction, multi-agency operations. And the intention is to demonstrate what we, as a community, have all been saying, is that it is possible to work together, to work in network, to share information, to share assets, and to work effectively and efficiently. We started in September, but it was more or less the same time frame as these three agencies were working together, and it has been a great experience. We have worked in a long way. What the Europeans expect from us to have a safe and secure maritime environment, performing these Coast Guard functions, no matter how we see them, but in fact they are very important to make sure that Europe is safe and secure from the maritime environment point of view. Thank you.
We are working for the member state, and why I asked this, that the audience should come to us, that could we do more for the member states? Because now when we are collaborating with each other, so we can provide more services for the national authorities. We already heard that there are more than 300 national authorities doing the Coast Guard functions, and this is a wide variety of different types of authorities which we are collaborating with. It is a challenging environment. There are different types of jurisdiction, as you mentioned, different type of legislation, different type of attitude on the member state authorities towards the services which is provided by the three agencies. And I think collaboration with the member state could be intensified, and we could, with this forum, explain more what we can do to the member state, and then also understand what member state could do more to support what we are doing. So, in
response to the question what we expect from member states, and maybe I would combine this with the question about what should happen in the daily business. It's true that Frontex usually deploys big operations, so we have famous operations in Italy, Triton, in Poseidon, Greece, but there are other activities which are less visible. And now the question in the daily work, in your daily work, and what kind of daily support we could provide, I think the experience has shown when we have an operation, like for instance in Italy with Triton, where we tested the deployment of inspector, fisheries inspector, some pollution contribution and to report to EMSA. Well, that's clear for the national authorities. In this case, it was Italy, because we have a command structure in order to run the operation. And normally, there are channels to exchange information. But if, in the context of some kind of monitoring of or surveillance activity, one agency suddenly get information that would require a follow-up from member states. Just an example. If a vessel which is supposed to be deployed in Frontex operation is on its way from Northern Europe, from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, or the other way around, do we want that those vessels still, well, sail back home, or do we want to use this time to contribute to Coast Guard functions at EU level, and maybe unexpectedly that this contribute to addressing an incident, an ongoing incident somewhere, that we brief you about the progress we make and about what we can achieve, and so that you can consider how to embed this in your daily work.
Reply to Admiral Dan Torell of the Swedish Coast Guard. First of all, the issue of national jurisdiction and the empowerment of inspector is something that we are working on in FCAR. So we are working mostly in the concept of the union inspector as how to train people to protect and to secure the evidence in order that those evidence should be accepted by another court. So we have different legal system, and we have not the same drivers and methodology for protecting the evidence for a common law system or for a Roman legal system. And that is something that we have been working many times in the FCAR. We had a working group in 2012, 2013, including some national prosecutor. I remember that the Netherlands participated to this project as well for the southern North Sea, and I think this is something that we can benchmark to other areas of maritime law if this idea is considered as interesting by the member state. You mentioned, Dan, that you had the feeling that our activity had been mostly playing agency with agency and mostly focusing on ourselves more than cooperating with the member state. You might have this impression, but I'm not entirely in agreement, because all we did was in fact for the member state. The idea was that you were the final user, the end user, and also the main actors. So if I try to give the FCAR perspective is from the TGDG, the Tactical Joint Deployment Group, which is operating the Joint Deployment Plan. And as I mentioned this morning, we create below the TGDG the fusion of two communities, the community of fishery control and border control, and they were involved in the steering of the operation, joint operation and joint deployment plan. And that has been done with and for the member states. Now, if I come to the cooperation for collecting data, for shadowing activities, all this information has been transmitted to the TGDG. The TGDG is our member state. Only the stakeholder are member states, and each, I would say, the TGDG is chaired by member states with the support of the agency. So this information and the more than 1,000 sightings provided in the cooperation have been transmitted in a near real time to the member state. When it comes to the sharing of platforms, some member states flow into with mass and were part of the this deployment, and also the idea of having a multi-purpose operation was involved basically built on the idea that the member states were providing platform of were providing inspector experts. And I would like to remind the commitment we have all together that we made on November the 29th in Catania, Sicily, that in 2018 we will start a multi-purpose operation with contribution from the Swedish Coast Guard in the Baltic Sea. And I'm looking forward to work all together in 2019, of course, with the contribution of the other coastal member states, and maybe not, maybe some other member states. When can we, for example, Finland, what can we expect from the member states? Voting in the council a regulation. It's very embarrassing for us that the same member states are not having the same position in the board, and that is a real concern. Because for us, it's not possible to go ahead. So what we are expecting, what I would expect is consistency and coherence between the decision and the implementation. I understand that you might have a different view because you are more experts than maybe executive, and that the board are specific, I would say, ecosystem with people which are directors, some others are more in the level of the implementation, and that you might have a different view. But that, for me, it's very important that we saw the sort of high fidelity between what is a joint discussion between the three boards, or organizing some specific workshop could be a way of clarifying the future. At the end of the day, you are the provider or offer the resources, and us, we are, to some extent, you are your instrument, you are in your hand. We are designed for working for you and for the Commission. So, depending on your expectation, we will try to reply to your expectation. If you are ambitious, we will be ambitious. But if you are no vision, we try to do our best, but the result might be not what you expected. So, and I will stop here. Let's be ambitious, let's be visionary, let's prepare the situation of tomorrow, and not prepare the fights and the war of yesterday. And that I know that we can do it together because we have did it in the past, and that for me it's the most important gift and privilege that we can have with the member states.
Then we had the other question from Ida, how to reach out the good results and synergies with the other agencies. I believe that Frontex is in the front line to collaborate with other agencies more widely in your domain. So maybe Fabrice would elaborate this question.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. When it comes, well, I have to repeat that we are a civilian agency, of course, and that according to EU law and EU standards, border management is a civilian task. However, in the course of our operations, we have sometimes vessels and crews with a military status. In some member states, and I think that Portugal is one of those, but there are other member states, where military assets can be used for civilian purpose in Coast Guard functions and for law enforcement. That means that they have to be trained in order to be ready to implement those civilian rules, be border management, or I don't know if this is relevant more than an agency, that's NATO. In Greece, between Greece and Turkey, because as you may know, NATO was invited by the European Union to deploy some vessels there as well, and Frontex has on a permanent basis a liaison officer deployed to the NATO flagship in that context. Whether this is really a cooperation with military entities, It's a cooperation with military entities for civilian purposes. Let's put it like this. Because it's not the mandate of an agency like Frontex to step in a military business. The difficulties and the challenges we see, and this is not only between EU agencies and military entities, but this is also sometimes within the same country between civilian and military entities, is the exchange of information, because sometimes military organizations overclassify information that cannot be shared then with civilian entities. While according to civilian standards, this kind of information could be protected, but not such a high level. So this is my experience. But when it comes to capacity building, I got a question one day from the European Defence Agency Executive Director, if I may tell this here to this audience, and he asked me, do you know what kind of drones you would like to have in 10 years from now for border management? And I must say that I was not able to answer this question. First, because I've never heard border management authorities in member states asking this kind of question. And, well, this is a question maybe, or these are areas where civilian and military entities could try to talk about and to see whether the question is relevant for both entities.
This pilot project. And also thank you, and very sincerely thank you to all the speakers today. And I'm probably in this room the least qualified person to appreciate what you have said, because I'm not an expert in your field. No, that's me, I guess. The way of working together, the cooperation, and the work they have done in this project. And so for me, that is a very significant, very telling measurement of whether it has been successful or not. I think it has been successful in that sense. And I leave it to the experts to judge whether the results actually live up to that standard. I think that's a very good standard. I'd like to thank also, of course, the members of the